if you talk about people who love this country, how about the people who have sacrificed and bled to make this country better, knowing how much work the country had to do to get better, particularly because some of its most divisive and oppressive impacts were impacting you?
As you talk about keeping your feet firm, we cannot omit what you went through during the campaigning. You were against someone who was of a total different ideology, someone who had the support of Donald Trump. This nation is now divided. It's not just the Republican Party in fractures, but Republican against Democrat. How do you plan to unite this state that is a microcosm of the larger community, the largeness of the country that's trying to find its way, that's still going through growing pains politically?
You know, I plan on really attacking that by attacking it head on. You aren't going to lecture me on patriotism.
82nd Airborne.
That's it. You know, my definition of patriotism was when I left my family and I deployed to Afghanistan with the 82nd Airborne Division and risked my life for this country. And you're not going to lecture me on that. You're not going to lecture me on patriotism when I know I was raised by patriots, because I was raised by teachers. I was raised by ministers. Right? My family is operating engineers. My family are people who built this country with their hands. You're not going to lecture me on patriotism. And I think it becomes incredibly important that we do not allow an individual or a party to bastardize this term. If you talk about people who love this country, how about the people who have sacrificed and bled to make this country better, knowing how much work the country had to do to get better, particularly because some of its most divisive and oppressive impacts were impacting you, right? That's patriotism. Patriotism is not working to destroy democracy. Patriotism is not saying that you love the country, but you hate half of the people in it. So this is something that, you know, we took a very aggressive approach to it on the campaign trail. And I think part of the reason that we ended up having such a resounding victory is if you make the argument, you can win the argument, but you gotta make the argument. And you cannot allow that just to be subsided.
There are so many parallels between you and former President Barack Obama. The only thing is, you are now a politician, and he was a politician moving into the White House, but he also used a historic Bible for his inauguration, Dr. King's Bible. But in my hand, I am blessed and honored to have the Bible that you were using when you give the oath as governor of the state of Maryland. It's your grandfather's Bible. Tell me about this Bible.
So my grandfather was actually the first one on my mom's side of the family born in this country. And his father, my great-grandfather, was a minister, and he was a vocal minister. He was one of these ministers that didn't just teach the word of God, but reminded people on earth they need to live a certain way. And eventually he started getting threats, and it was the Ku Klux Klan that ran them out, where in the middle of the night, he picked up his family, to include his toddler son, my grandfather, and they left this country. They went back to Jamaica. And much of my family said that they would never come back to this country. But my grandfather did, because my grandfather, in all of his humility, he said, this country would be incomplete without me. So he came back, he went to an HBCU, and he became a minister just like his father, except he became the first black minister in the history of the Dutch Reformed Church. So my grandfather was actually the first trailblazer in our family. The reason why this Bible means so much to me, and you can see, I mean, this thing is held together by tape.
Held together by tape and notes inside.
Notes.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, old sermons.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I always say this Bible is a workbook. This is a workbook. It has notes in the margin. It has comments. It has questions. He literally has questions about he wonders what X means or what Y means. And I love this Bible. And I'm so proud that, you know, this is a Bible that I not only use, but I'll get sworn in on this Bible. And the reason it's so powerful to me is because this allows me a gauge into his mind. It allows me to maintain a level of closeness to someone who was one of my heroes and still is, and allows me to understand in his own words what I'm supposed to take away from this. And I actually think about in the book of Joshua, which by the way happens to be one of his middle names, how Moses passed the baton when Moses transitioned, how essentially he passed the baton to Joshua. And while Moses led the people for 40 years through the desert, and then when he got his glory and the sea parted, he died. And then it was Joshua's point. And there's a point he writes in the Bible, and it was a sermon he gave where he said, you know, how Moses must have felt a certain type of way about that. Because he's like, I did all the work. I led my people through heat and cold and storms. And when comes time for my glory, you tell me to come home because Joshua's going to take him the rest of the way. And he would tell this sermon about how he knows at that moment that was God telling Moses, it's because you've done your job already.
Well done, my good and faithful
Well
servant.
done, my good and faithful servant. Now it's Joshua's turn to do his. And that's the mentality that I'm taking into this next journey.